My name is Dr. Melissa Sporn, and as part of the Managing the Moments series for the Safe Community Coalition, today I'm going to be talking about launching your high school student to college. I'm not going to be talking about how to get your child into college or how to do better on their SATs. I'm going to be talking about conversations that you need to have with your student before they head off to college. So whether that's 6 months away or 18 months away, really these are conversations for junior and senior parents to begin to have with their students. So the first part that I'm going to talk about is the issue of grieving. As a parent of 2 college students, I can tell you that this process you're going to begin to navigate, beginning to say goodbye to your children. We've spent 18 years kind of working ourselves to a degree out of a job. And that process is sad and it's hard. So as we begin to have these conversations with our children, understand that you're going to have your own emotions begin to come up about the idea of them not being with you. And that's natural and normal. This presentation that I'm giving today, I have given to probably a half dozen or more high schools, not during COVID. So I'm going to adjust it a little bit for COVID, but most of the conversations that you would have had last year, you will have in 3 years if you're beginning to send your child off to college. Clearly, some of us are going to be excited about becoming empty nesters or sending our somewhat difficult or challenging or entitled child off to college, and that's okay too. It's good to feel excited about the idea of your child going off to college. Some of us will experience sadness, some of us will experience elation, and either way it's okay. So the statistics. About 60% of entering college students graduate within 6 years. I remember when I was going on tours of various colleges back pre-COVID with my daughter, colleges would talk about their 6-year graduation statistic, and I would say, 6 years? Wait a second. When I was in college, most people graduated in 4 years. Well, the reality now is that about 60% graduate within 6 years. And it's important to look at those statistics, to talk with your child about what sets you up for success and how you might graduate within 4 years if that's a family goal, both for financial reasons or because they want to go on to graduate work or get a job. About 28% drop out within the first year. Of that, about 1 in 3 of those continue on at other institutions. So it's important to kind of set our expectations about what's happening when kids go off to school. And part of the reason we're having these conversations with them is to buffer them and to make them part of that statistic of success. We want to encourage them. So in order to thrive in college, students need resiliency. They need to know how to manage a budget. They need to know how to stay healthy. They need to become comfortable with who they are. They need to advocate for themselves with professors, with roommates, with friends. They need to learn from disappointment, and they need to engage with their professors. So now we're going to start kind of the conversation. Let's talk. You're going to set aside a time with your student on a once-a-week basis. You don't want to have these conversations as they're leaving to go off to sports or coming home after a class or right now during virtual learning when they have a break in virtual learning. You want to set up a sacrosanct time every week where you're going to sit down and have these conversations. Be it on a Sunday, we're going to talk for a limited time, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. Recognize that the average pre-college student, junior and senior, when you say the word college, it's like tasing them. I sort of say they go, because it's so stressful. So you really want to introduce this conversation in a way that says, this isn't about you getting into college, this isn't about your SATs or your ACTs, this is really a conversation about how to live well and what to expect when you go off to college. First conversation you want to start with is about budget. So before the application process, ideally, for those junior parents, and at this point for senior parents, as you're beginning to get those acceptances in, you really want to talk about budget. What are we expecting as parents to pay for college? How much can we afford? And what type of spending expectations do you have when you're at college? If you have a senior right now, it's a nice time to kind of sit down and talk with them about a budget. How often do they expect to be going out to eat? How often might they need personal hygiene products? What's their expectation about getting their hair frosted or getting their nails done? And how much will that cost? And how much of that am I willing to pay for? And how much am I expecting you to pay for? You also can talk about determining what if there's a spending limit, beyond which. And I know that oftentimes, and I'll say that many of the students in our communities have debit cards, some have credit cards, and I remember one of the clients that came into my office arrived post their first semester in college. Parents called very upset because the student had racked up about $12,000 in debt on their credit card. When confronted with this, the student said, "But you said I was supposed to make friends." Like, that was the most important thing. So he had bought pizza for his whole dorm and taken them all out for brunch every Sunday. So, and hence he had a very large credit card bill. So what you want to do is kind of give parameters and boundaries around which you're comfortable with your student spending. The next one we're going to talk about is moving into issues of safety. So personal safety, we're going to talk about every college campus. As you do the virtual tours, if you're able to go on a campus, you're going to notice the blue light system. They're going to talk about these safety buttons they have all around campus that students can press, and security will come immediately. That's really important. Most schools have escort services. These are generally students who will walk you from one place to another. Usually 2 students will show up to assist you. Some have transport services with cars for larger campuses. You want to encourage your students to take advantage of that. That if they feel unsafe, they need to do something. That really that action is going to be the most important thing. You're going to look at safety maps and secure routes from and to places that you want to encourage them to travel in groups. Especially for girls, women who are going off to college, we want to encourage them sort of leave no sister behind was a phrase we used in college, that you show up together, you leave together. Like, that was really important. And this is a good time to introduce a conversation on your parental views about alcohol and drug use and what your expectations are. What we find is that even college-age students mediate their behavior based on their parents' perspectives. That you sharing what you think, what you feel, what's important to you will help them make decisions when they're exposed to these things and offered drugs or alcohol. We're going to talk a little bit about the transition from, in terms of both safety, but also in terms of kind of managing and balancing their time. Part of what comes up when we talk about safety is this issue of students going from almost 40 hours of school a week, add on to that extracurriculars, community service, maybe religious practices, and family time, and hopefully some time for socializing, to about 15 hours of classes a week. And for some, that's it. Some may have extracurriculars, some may have clubs and organizations, but that's a lot more free time. So that really challenges a student in terms of managing that additional time. So how might you spend that time and what might you do with it? The difference in rigor in their classes, where, in high school we have rubrics, there's opportunities to retake tests if you do poorly. There's a lot of mitigating opportunities to improve your grade. In college, you may enter a class where you have a midterm and a final, and that's it. And those shifts can be a little disconcerting for college freshmen. So really beginning to discuss the importance of keeping up on their schoolwork, keeping up on their reading, recognizing that while they have all this free time, their primary job when they go off to college is to do college, to do that academic piece, and that when they've completed the academic piece, then they have time to socialize, to engage in other activities, that's really important. So thriving in the classroom. Here we're going to focus on, what your expectations are for your student as they go off to college. And, I worked with a parent who had basically calculated the dollar amount per minute of class time and express to their student the importance of attending class because of how much it costs for them to be in class, I think really impressing upon your student that going to class is an expectation. That you're, barring them being sick, they need to be in class or on their virtual classroom time. That this is what we're paying for, but this is also where they're going to have an opportunity to learn. To meet their professors. I encourage my kids within the first month of school to set up an appointment with each of their teachers and to go and meet them. They don't have to have questions. They can just go in and say, hi, I'm in your class, your 100 level sociology class, and I just want an opportunity to say hello. I tell what I call the baloney story. And when I was a freshman in college, I was in a sociology class, my Sociology 100 class, and I was in a 350-person lecture hall. And the professor was lecturing, and we were getting ready for our midterm exam, and he said something that contradicted something in the book that we were reading. And I had a feeling this was going to be on the test. So I went to his office hours, which were, middle of the day, and I walked into his room. The door was a little bit ajar. I knocked on it, and as I opened, I noticed he was just about to take a bite of what looked like a bologna sandwich. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your lunch. And he said, no, this is my office hours, come on in. And I introduced myself, and I told him, I was in the 5th row on the 40th seat on the left of his lecture hall, and I had a question about something that I thought contradicted between the book and his lecture. And he said, have you eaten lunch? And I thought, oh no, he's going to offer me half of his bologna sandwich. And I was like, no. And he said, oh, wonderful. And he threw his bologna sandwich into the garbage, and he said, come on. And he took me to the top of the campus, which was a restaurant on our campus, on the top of the hotel of our, on our campus. And we're sitting there having lunch, and I am the only student who's sitting in a seat. There are students who are serving us, and I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. And I finally got up the gumption to say, do you do this often? And he's what, eat lunch? And I said, no, take students out to lunch. And he said, well, nobody ever comes to my office hours, so when they do, I reward them. So I ended up continuing to go to lunch with him probably once a month, even when I didn't have classes with him, and he ended up being one of my advisors on my senior thesis. Having a cordial relationship, having your professors know you is advantageous to you. So you can tell the baloney story if you want, or you can tell your own personal story about relationships that you had with your professors and how that helped you understand the material in your classes, how it helped you, encouraged you to learn. It can even help your grade, but make it a strong point that during the first month of school, you expect your student to meet with each of their professors individually. This is super important when your student attends a big school, but it's also important when they attend a small school. I also want to say that if you get anything below a B, you need to meet with your professors. So we're going to meet with them in the first month of class, and then if you get anything below a B, have a meeting with your professor. Just expressing that you have concern about that is going to help them. They want you to succeed. College professors are really invested in their students' learning. They love the material, they're excited about it, and they want you to succeed. So if you're meeting with them and expressing that you don't understand something, they're going to take the time, they're going to invest the energy into you doing better in their classes. If you're in one of those large lecture halls, I'm going to encourage you to sit in the front. I know that feels uncomfortable and awkward, but research has demonstrated that students who sit towards the first quarter of seats in a classroom actually do academically better. Why? They tend to be more engaged. They tend to be asked questions by the professor, or they tend to feel more comfortable engaging with the professor, answering and asking questions. Meet with your academic advisor. Most schools are going to encourage this and even require it in the first quarter that you're on campus, in the first semester you're on campus, but do it often. We see very often students who are in their junior year and are realizing, oh, I don't have any of the requirements, I need to graduate next year. So keeping invested in the process through meeting with your academic advisor and making sure you're on track, you're taking the requirements that you need within your major or in general studies to get your degree is really important. Again, we want that 4-year graduation rate, not that 6-year graduation rate, so that's important. What are your parental expectations for a GPA? Some parents make their students pay for anything below a C. Some parents just say, if you get below a C, then we're going to have a conversation. Are you expecting to know their grades? If your student is 18, unless you have documentation, and we'll talk about forms in a little bit, you may not have access to their grades. You may not know how they do. Is that an expectation that they're going to share their grades with you? And if it is, you need to articulate that before they head out to school. Encourage them to get to know one other person in their class. This is especially important during virtual learning, so that if they miss a class, if they're sick, or if they don't understand material, there's somebody else in the classroom with whom they can connect. If the professors aren't facilitating that in a virtual setting, send an email to the professors and ask them if they would be willing to share the student list for the class, or at least share some names of other students whom you might connect with to have a study session or to share notes with, to get to know. It's another way to connect with others, especially in our virtual learning environment today. And use academic support where needed. If you have an IEP or a 504 plan in high school, there is student support services in college, and those can transfer, but you have to do the legwork. You have to reach out to the student support office and ask for help. You have to encourage them to share the information with your professors. You may have to independently share the information with your professors, letting them know that you have a learning disability and what accommodations you need to succeed in their class. A lot of that becomes on your student, and that's why, especially for junior students, I'm going to encourage students to make those calls and, as a parent, kind of step back from that from junior year forward, so that students begin to do that in high school so they can navigate it more easily when they get to college. This is a really challenging one, and in today's day, what we're hearing more and more in the quote that you're reading is from Jose Antonio Bowen from Goucher. And one of the things that we're finding is that students, because of technology, they're maintaining their relationship with their peers in high school, and it's in some ways preventing them from engaging in the college experience and making new friends. So you really want to have a conversation with your students about the fact that when they first get onto campus, they may not know anybody. They may be the only one from their hometown, the only one from their high school. They may have some peers who went to their high school who they feel, I'm going to kind of cling to because I know you. And what you want to encourage them to do is to meet new people. So you want to talk about, how do you meet new people? For many students, they haven't done this in a long time, maybe not in 4 years. Maybe they haven't done it at all. Their friends that they have now are the same friends they had in elementary school. So you really want to talk about how you want them to go out of their way and say hello to strangers, to introduce themselves. Most schools have orientation programs, and even now during COVID, they're encouraging social interaction and opportunities to meet new peers, but you want to encourage your student to do that. It does mean putting down their phone, setting some limits on their technology. If I'm always on Instagram looking at what my high school friends are doing, I'm not really engaging or actively involved in the moment I am right now with peers who are with me on my college campus. Mental health. So now we're going to kind of transition into one of the reasons why many students end up not completing college in 6 years is they experience a mental health challenge and have difficulties emotionally, both with the rigor of academics or the social and non-academic aspects of college experience. So about 60% of college students report experiencing overwhelming anxiety at one point or another, specifically during their freshman year. You can imagine that right now during COVID, that number is probably much higher. That feeling isolated, feeling lonely, not feeling connected, feeling awkward and uncomfortable, seeing other people who seem to be happy. I remember my daughter called me during her freshman year in college, and she said, everybody else on campus seems really happy. They're running around and everybody's smiling. I see people laughing, I see people smiling, and I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling homesick, and I'm missing all my friends from home. And I said, honey, if I interviewed all the people who were around you on campus, would they tell me you're looking lonely, you're looking sad? And she, oh, no. When I'm out of my dorm room, I'm smiling. And I said, They're masking just like you're masking. Everybody's feeling awkward and uncomfortable. Everybody doesn't know where they fit in quite yet. You just have to go up to somebody and say, this is really scary. This is really uncomfortable. which is something she wasn't going to do. But I encouraged her at least to talk to her neighbors on her dorm floor to begin to make connections. And slowly but surely, within the first several weeks, the first month, by the 6th week, she felt a part of it. I reminded her that when she transitioned to high school, her first experience was feeling overwhelmed. She really didn't have a whole lot of friends from her middle school in her classes. She didn't know a lot of people, and she was thinking, this was a bad idea, But within the first month, she was part of that school community. She'd made friends, she knew where she was going, she knew where her classes were, she began to know her teachers, and she just felt comfortable. So I asked her to please give it that time, to give it a month, to give it 6 weeks, to begin to integrate into the community. All transitions are hard, and to anticipate and expect that. In terms of mental health, we're going to talk about how to stay healthy. So you see a lot of the kind of negative statistics about what kids are struggling with, but it's really important to talk about how do we do preventative things to make sure that they maintain their health and well-being. One is going to be discussing how important it is to recognize when they're feeling stressed, depressed, or anxious, and to identify resources that they have at school and resources that you have available to them at home if they need it. So first and foremost is going to be what's called the RA or RD on their floor. These are older students who are trained to provide support, to provide caring, sort of to be a floor mommy or daddy, and they are unbelievable resources for what's available on campus to help get your student engaged. Now, these aren't people whom you should reach out to, though I'm going to encourage you to get their phone number at the beginning of the semester. I'm going to tell you don't use it unless it's a true emergency, because if you do, it will mortify your student. But to encourage your student to connect with them so that if they're feeling stressed, if they're feeling anxious, they have somebody with whom they can talk to. That person is trained to do an assessment to determine if they need to go to campus mental health. If your student has experienced an emotional or mental health challenge during high school, I'm going to encourage you and your student, when you tour the school, if you do a virtual tour, to explore the mental health counseling center on campus, to find out what the rules are about how I make an appointment, perhaps even to make an appointment before they show up on campus, so that they're scheduled in the first week to 2 weeks of campus to meet somebody. They never have to see them again, but they'll have a face and a name, and if they experience struggles, they can go to that person. That's a really nice resource to have, and once you've already met somebody, it makes it much easier to show up when you're struggling. So you're going to find out where are the mental health services provided on campus. How do I make an appointment? Are there drop-in services available if I need them? So if I'm going along my way, everything's going fine, but all of a sudden I hit a wall, can I just show up? Or how do I access those services? What mental health programs are available? Some schools have groups, ongoing groups, or drop-in groups. And again, during COVID, schools are providing virtual services. Community counselors and therapists are providing virtual services to campus community. And are there limits of the type of service that are available? Now we're going to move into documents you may wish to get for yourself. Because our children, and many of them will have transitioned to 18 before they go off to college, some will turn 18 when they're in college, there's access issues for us in terms of limited ability to know what's happening with them. The first form that I'm going to recommend is the HIPAA medical release form. This form allows you to find out if your child experiences a crisis on campus and you need to make a medical decision to assist them. So if your student passes out because of an illness, so right now with COVID, students who became sick and needed to be intubated, if they don't have a HIPAA form that expressly says I can speak as a doctor to their parents, I wouldn't reach out to the parents at all. And it's really important that you talk with your child about when you'll use this and when you won't. I am not going to ask a doctor whether or not, your you've gotten an STD or needed birth control. But I am going to be there if a doctor contacts me to help make decisions for your medical well-being. The healthcare proxy is really that form that is going to take precedent if you are unconscious. If a student's unconscious, power of attorney is really more about financial issues. That's going to allow you to know if your student is racking up debt on campus. Some colleges now have kind of debit cards that students can use in local stores, in stores on campus, in cafes. And those students who are used to getting Starbucks every day here for $6 are doing it on campus and sometimes treating their friends. So you will want to know what the financial circumstance is and any legal discussion. So if your student's involved in an altercation or breaking a rule on campus, campus will not discuss that with you unless you have this power of attorney form. And the last one is the FERPA. And that establishes your right as a student to inspect and review their educational records. So this is where, if you wish to have access to their grades, you would get it through this. Additionally, you may wish to go to the actual health center at your child's school to fill out school-specific forms for HIPAA. So when to contact the college. I said you may wish to, when you move your child in, get the phone number of the RA. You're going to only contact the college, either the RA or the mental health center on campus, the dean of students, if your student is expressing risk to self or other, if they're in circumstances that you feel are endangering their life. And in that case, absolutely, I want you to reach out to the RA, to the dean of students, to the mental health center, and let them know, I'm very concerned about my child. If you haven't heard from your kid in a week, don't do that. First, wait and see if they contact you. They may be overwhelmed with their academics. They may be socially having a blast. They may be pledging a sorority or fraternity and just have no time to contact you. We'll talk about communication and the importance of them returning your texts or returning your calls. But if they choose not to and you have no evidence that they're experiencing depression or anxiety, you don't need to reach out to the school. If, however, they have a history of anxiety or depression, or they've expressed to you they're feeling hopeless or helpless, and you're truly concerned, do reach out first to the RA. They'll check in and just make sure your student's doing okay, and then escalate it up to the counseling center or the dean of students to get verification that your kid is okay. It's important for your student to begin to learn from disappointment and feel comfortable with that transition. As Julie Lythcott-Haims would say, she wrote the book How to Raise an Adult. She says her favorite F words are fail, flop, fall. And we really want our students to understand that all of those are part of the college experience. That we anticipate that they're going to have breakups with boyfriends or girlfriends, that they're going to experience friendship fails, that they're going to have difficulty in their academics at some point as they traverse through their academic years in college, and that one failure does not mean they're a failure. That we want to separate out behavior from person, that they can experience rejection and not feel rejected. That they themselves have worth and value and be able to work through that. So one of the ways that you can help them to do this is, as they experience these things, as they will, through their junior and senior year, that you want them to learn to not catastrophize. So when something negative happens, that they don't blow it up into always and never, but instead kind of keep it limited to this experience. This is happening to me now. It doesn't necessarily inform what's going to happen. An F on a test in high school, or even an F on a quarter grade, doesn't mean I'm not going to be a successful adult. It doesn't mean I can't become whatever it is I wish to become. We have unbelievable opportunities to correct for our lives. And what we're thinking and feeling doesn't necessarily mean it is so. So just because I'm feeling a certain way, feelings aren't facts, I need to kind of check in and see, is this so or not? Self-kindness. How would you respond to a close friend if they said what you're feeling? what would your advice be? To give them that encouragement to kind of have that internal voice that says, I've got this, I can get through this. That universality, that this is a common feeling, that everyone's feeling this way, as I shared the story about my daughter's first kind of experiencing campus life and feeling overwhelmed and homesick, that all the other students that were feeling this too. Staying healthy continued. So I'm going to talk about the 3 pillars of sleeping, eating, and exercise. Really important to impress upon your students, and this is a time, junior year and senior year, you're going to begin to transition from what I call coach to cheerleader, and really helping your students observe their sleeping, eating, and exercise patterns and how they impact their mood, that mind-body connection. Really encouraging them to eat healthily, to know what a typical portion size is, to know how much protein they need to feed their brain is really important, to stay hydrated. That sleeping is critical, remembering and encouraging them to maintain routines in school. Obviously in college sleep schedules get crazy, but helping them to recognize that if they pull an all-nighter, that's going to impact them for at least 3 to 5 days post. So we want them to appreciate and understand what the impacts of lack of sleep has, that they're going to have more difficulty with problem solving, with organizing, with planning, with studying, with memorization. And so doing that on a consistent basis has a negative impact potentially on their grades. And exercise. Getting outside, getting in nature is really important. Any opportunity they have to go for walks, to be engaged in extracurricular intramural sports or club sports if they're not on a team sport is going to be really important. Moving their body and getting that blood flowing is another way to kind of fend off depression and anxiety. Now we're going to have the dreaded talk about sex. This is the talk that most parents want to avoid with their kids, but it's really important. My son has a friend who went off to college, and he got to college and he was unpacking his things, and his mother had gotten him a box of condoms, and he sort of said, well, that was great that she sent me with these, but we've never talked about, this is her way of dealing with this topic with me. She bought the condoms, she put them in my suitcase, but we never had the conversation. So I want you to begin to have a conversation about sex. I want you to talk with your kids about your beliefs, your values, your ethics, your morals about sexual interactions with their peers. I want you to talk with your boys about being responsible, about consent, about your expectations that if they're inebriated or if the individual they're with is inebriated, that it's not a time to make a decision to go forward with intimacy. You want to talk with your girls about the relationship between alcohol and sexual assault on campus. There's a movie called The Hunting Ground that I recommend parents watch with their daughters specifically. Sons can watch it too, before they go off to college. It's a little scare tactic, but it really, The Hunting Ground talks about the incidence of sexual assault on campus and the connection between sexual assault and drug and alcohol use. That whenever a young woman on campus imbibes drugs or alcohol, their ability to make choices and decisions is inhibited. And they make themselves more vulnerable. This isn't blaming the victim, this is recognizing the correlation, not causation, correlation. And it's really important that we have these conversations with our daughters to prevent them from being in situations that we would wish them never to be in. Communication. So this is where we're going to discuss with them how we're going to communicate with them and what our expectations are about our communication. I know some parents who are going to say, I want to hear from my kid every day. That's probably not going to happen. And if it does initially, it's part of that loneliness and homesickness. But we would hope and anticipate that it would dissipate over time. But you may want to schedule kind of a once a week FaceTime or check-in. And say, like, Sunday at 5, let's just check in with each other and see how you're doing. And we'd love to be able to see your face. We have technology today that allows us to do that, and it's so amazing to be able to check in with them in this way. Recognizing that some weeks they won't be able to do it because they'll have other activities or events, and some weeks they will. You can talk with them about when we text, do you expect to be text back? And if so, how soon? I would think that they're not going to text you back immediately, but it might be nice that within 24 hours they get back to you. That's an expectation. I sort of say, we're paying for the phone, we expect you to use it in some ways to be in contact with us. That our anxiety also is high about how they're doing, and even just doing great, Mom, quells all my worries. Like just a, hey, how's it going? And just a thumbs up. One emoji can make my day. So share that with your kids, and that's really important. When your child calls with problems, which they will, I want to encourage you not to jump into problem-solving mode. I want to encourage you to listen, to kind of be an anthropologist or sociologist, and just ask a lot of questions, but not give advice, not give recommendations, not give suggestions. Just say to them, what are you going to do about this? How might you solve this problem? What resources do you have available to deal with this? What would other people tell you to do if you ask them? And only give advice if they specifically say, tell me what to do. If they specifically ask you, what would you do, or what should I do, Mom or Dad, then what I want you to do is I want you to hem and haw a little. It's going to sound something like this. Gee, I'm not sure. But if I were in that situation, I've never been in that situation, so I'm not really sure how I would do it, but perhaps you want to do this. Maybe that's not good, but I don't know. And the reason I'm encouraging you to hem and haw a little is because when you definitively tell them this is what you should do, chances are they're going to do the exact opposite. They have to come up with the answer themselves, and when you hem and haw a little, it gives them an opportunity to hear what you're suggesting, to kind of funnel it through their decision-making process, and then use it to make a choice. They're more likely to follow your advice if you're not giving it to them as this is what you need to do. It's time to unwrap the bubble wrap. So your child's a junior, your child's a senior, and it's almost January, and now's a good time to kind of set them off independently into the world. Obviously, within COVID, you can't do that. But what I want you to do is to really begin to take the training wheels off. You're no longer going to wake them up to make sure that they're online to get to their classes, their virtual classes. You're not going to, do their laundry. You're not going to pick up their materials they need if they need it. You're not going to kind of rush in and save them if they have a circumstance that they're dealing with where they need support. You're going to advise them. You're going to, again, become that cheerleader, not the coach. And really sort of the difference between asking, where our normal questions would be, who are you going with, where are you going, what's going on? And I know with COVID, it's hard not to jump into those. And in some ways, our older children are becoming sort of developmentally younger because of the fear and anxiety. But I would rather you say, tell me how you're going to keep safe when you go and do what you're going to do today. What thoughts are you giving to COVID when you're going out and meeting your friends? Then who's going to be there, and how do you know if they're safe, and what do you, kind of begin to give them some agency and some independence and autonomy around making good choices and decisions, because when they're on the college campus, we want them to think about those questions we ask them, but in a proactive way, not in a pejorative, I felt stifled way. So you have 6 months, you have 18 months before your kid goes off into the world to college. This is a time where you may begin to think about, is my kid ready? And I want to introduce the idea of a gap year. There's wonderful research that a gap year is really productive and helpful for students who choose to take it. If you're feeling like your child really has no motivation to do college applications, can't independently get their work done, is constantly needing your support, I want you to kind of differentiate between how much of that is me imposing myself on my kid or my kid truly needing my assistance. And if they really do need all that assistance and support, all that scaffolding, they may not be ready to go off to college. They may need a gap year, and that's okay. A gap year is a really wonderful opportunity to develop the skills and strategies they need to have to be successful and to finish college in 4, not 6 years. So I know that seniors are going to be hearing from their EA and ED colleges. Juniors are going to begin to be formulating their lists come spring. I want you to be realistic about where your child's going off to college. There are over 5,000 accredited universities in the United States, not to mention all the amazing international colleges. They're all good schools. My husband and I, we were doing a tour of colleges with my son, and we were about to visit a school, and my husband said, "This one isn't such a good school." And I pulled the car over to the side of the road, and I pulled my husband out of the car, and I said, "We don't do judgment around colleges. All colleges are good. You know, some are more competitive, some are less competitive." But recognizing that good fit is really important. Where You Go Isn't Who You Are is a book by Frank Bruni. I encourage junior parents to read it. It really talks about the research that going to an Ivy League school doesn't necessarily set you up for life, that actually, you know, being a B or a C student in an Ivy League school could be detrimental compared to going to a state school and being an A student. So really looking at that. Also, Malcolm Gladwell talks about David and Goliath, really talks about that research about being in a school that's a good fit for you. Listen to your child about acceptance. I worked with a family that whose child got into UVA and got into Christopher Newport, and she wanted to go to Christopher Newport, and the parents couldn't understand how she could possibly want to go to a school that they felt was inferior. No issues about Christopher Newport. I love Christopher Newport. And I really encourage the parents to let their daughter make the decision, because they had decided, and this is a conversation, that she would be driving the bus and she would make the decision ultimately. But when it came down to it and she was choosing a school that they didn't feel was right for her, they were getting kind of upset. Ultimately, she decided to go to Christopher Newport. She had absolutely fabulous 4 years. She did really well. She entered a nursing program post that, and they wrote me saying how happy they were they listened to her voice, because she may not have been as successful or felt as accomplished at UVA. So really listening to your child. A reach is a reach for a reason. Recognize that reach schools it's highly unlikely that your student will get in. I say there are 24,000 public universities in the United States. There are approximately 20,000 private institutions. Then we have homeschoolers, international students. Colleges admitted, Ivy League colleges admitted 14,000 students last year. So every valedictorian of public and private high schools, every outstanding homeschool student, the most exceptional international students, can't get into an Ivy League school. So I want you to have realistic expectations for your kids and set those expectations for them. Think about whether your child is better off being a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond. Talk with them about class size. Do they want sort of a sage on the stage lecturing to them, or do they want interaction with their professors, discussions? Do they do better? And whose decision is this ultimately? That's the part of the conversation I want you to have with your child. Who makes this final decision? Last, I want to kind of talk about at what age you thought yourself an adult. So I want you to think for a moment and think back to when you were your kid's age. At what age did you think, I'm an adult? Like, I got this. And at what age did you truly become an adult? And by become an adult, I mean you were financially, physically, and emotionally independent from your parents. For most of us, we thought ourselves an adult at 18 to 20. We went off to college, we made our own friends, we had money, we sort of spent on our own, went to health services on our own, made our own medical appointments. But truly, we weren't financially, emotionally, and physically independent from our parents till we were in our late 20s, for some of us early 30s. And I tell you this because I want you to recognize the difference between a teenage brain, an unmyelinated brain, and an adult brain. That your children are going to make mistakes. That I want you to have expectations of them that they're still adolescents, even though they're 18 to 22, that they're still developing. So really, recognize that they're not kind of fully formed yet, and anticipate that sometimes they're going to make mistakes. Focus less on managing and more on enjoying them. Again, that cheerleader versus coach. The 17 years of guidance you've given them, 18, 17 years of guidance and support and encouragement has worked. Like, that they've gotten to this moment, that they're going off to school. We tend to forget, because we go to schools here in our community where 99% of students go on for higher education, that nationally that average is about 60% or lower. So that your children have achieved this milestone is remarkable. Let them make mistakes. Again, fail, flop, fall. Encourage them to self-advocate. Try to not step in for them. Don't be that helicopter or that bulldozer parent. Prepare for those tough moments. It will be hard to separate. I can tell you, I held it together. I didn't cry as we unpacked my daughter. I didn't cry as we kind of kissed and hugged goodbye. And then the moment I turned, I lost it. So it's going to be hard moments, and coming back to the house and seeing their empty room is challenging and difficult, but it's exactly what we should be doing at a time where we should be doing it, and as challenging as it is, it's wonderful. Let them know they are enough, that they're smart enough, they're capable enough, they're beautiful enough, they're interesting enough, they're funny enough, that they are enough. For young women, over the summer it might be a good idea to read Rachel Simon's book about the good enough girl. Encourage intrinsic goals. What's meaningful for them? Encourage them not to kind of have to sort of swim with all the fish. If they love to read a book and hang out in their room on a Friday night, that's okay. Just because everybody's going out and going and doing something doesn't mean they have to go along. At the same token, I'm going to say I want them to take risks. I want them to move outside of their comfort zone and do things at college that they might not alternatively do, take classes that might not be in their wheelhouse of things I'm great at, but to encourage them to kind of move outside of their comfort zone. And that's it. Hopefully I've given you some fodder for discussion. Be open to the responses your children is going to have. Recognize that this is a difficult transition for them as well. Be open to the questions they have. And I wish them and you good luck in the journey. Thank you.